we've got 4 speakers. I'm going to be handing over to Sander, who will organize the speakers. There are the speakers there. Couple of sort of house rules, if you like. Questions and discussion after the presentation. We're just going to open it up. You can just speak. So there's no horrible question submission systems. You just do the old-fashioned way. You put your hand up and speak. Sander will be moderating across that. Please, as I can see most of you are doing right now, put yourself on mute when you're not speaking, or at least if you've got colleagues and or dogs or children, try and keep them slightly quiet. That'd be wonderful, so that we can all enjoy this this session. I think that's it. I'm going to hand over to Sander.
Great, thank you very much, Justin. Yeah, if any questions come up in the meantime, you can also put them in chat. We will get to them at the end of the round, but we can also read from the chat. That is not a problem. Let's get started maybe with a couple of very short introductions, just to get to know the people that are speaking today. Who you are, where you're from, the company you work for, and maybe shortly what your experience is with apps in 1 or 2 sentences. And let's get started with Christoph Putz.
Thanks. Yes. So I'm Christoph Putz from Acris E-commerce. I'm the technical lead, and yes, we as a company are focused on Shopware 6. We have already about 80 Shopware 6 plugins in the store, and also now about 5 apps in the store. And we are focused on creating plugins and apps which really can be great used for the customers and really are focused for use in practice. And that's our goal, and that we stand for, and that we also want to focus for future, not only for plugins and for apps. And yes, I think that's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Then I'll hand it over to Alexander Barton.
Yeah, hi together. My name is Alexander. I'm the CEO of Shop Studio, and we are an agency specialized in shopware, helping e-commerce owners to grow the business, of course, and to create a stable foundation. And we are also a plugin or extension manufacturer with some well-known apps like the Google Tag Manager, or a blog plugin or recipe plugin, and many more.
Right. Thank you very much. Christopher?
Yeah. Hi, Christopher. I'm fond of Shape and Shift. Originally from Germany, but living in Cyprus. So we have our company in Cyprus. I don't know, maybe some people know us or me from our blog plugin, maybe. That is basically a plugin in the store, but I think used by over 2,200 shops. It's open source, so this was my first touch point, let's say, with the Shopware 6. Currently, we are building a pretty, let's say, huge app, which is called Bionic SEO or SEO, which should support the shop owners with all this stuff related to SEO topics. And I think that's it. No.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. And then last we'll go to Christian Rades.
Yeah, hello, I'm Christian, and yeah, I'm working at Shopware. I'm a principal engineer there, and I'm one of the people you can blame for all of this, because I was involved in creating the app system. And so yeah, I'm here to talk to you, to get some feedback, but also to present our point of view.
All right. Perfect. Thank you very much. So to get right into it, maybe it makes sense to look a little bit at the differences between apps and plugins. Maybe, Christian, you can kick it off by kind of highlighting the differences you see before I'll ask the rest of the speakers.
Yeah, sure. So what we're talking about is the new app system, or not new, but like newer than the plugin system. And the main difference here is about clearer APIs. So in the plugin system, the APIs are all defined through in-language PHP features and dependency injection, things like that. And that works well for most use cases. But the issue is, now that we are providing a SaaS solution, and our like audience becomes bigger and bigger, we need a solution that can deliver two things. One is more interfaces that are more stable, something like APIs, for example, and also a solution that does not include running PHP code on cloud systems, because again, this is a massive security issue. And it's also easy for one broken plugin to break other stores that haven't even installed it. And so the idea was to create a system that makes it way clearer where the Shopware interface actually lies, and to also provide more stability there. So we decided to implement a webhook system, implement a manifest XML as a definition of like what your app wants to interact with it. And so we built a system that uses HTML and our REST endpoints and webhooks to create extensions to Shopware itself and interact with the system, as well as deliver things like theme changes.
Right. Thank you. Very clear. Yeah. What I definitely like about the app approach is where you would used to write PHP. Now it's a more declarative style, right? So it puts the onus of keeping things backwards compatible on Shopware instead of the developers, which is in general good. Alexander, what are some of the differences that you want to highlight when it comes to dealing with apps and building apps?
For me, the main difference is that apps are easier to develop with because you only need like Twig. You need CSS and maybe Sass, of course. You need some JavaScript or TypeScript, and that's pretty much all. So, for example, if you're a front-end developer, this is of course good news because you can use like your favorite tools. You use it anyway daily, and program, of course, some front-end features. And it's even possible with app scripts to program some backend features too, like endpoints. You can hook into different logic, and all with just Twig.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And Christoph, but you have a lot of plugins in the store. Now you're getting into apps. What are some of the differences that you see there?
Okay, sorry.
It was for me, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we are used to. The question is how plugins or apps are created, and normally a customer comes to us and tell us which solution, as what he needs, and we try to make the solution for him. And currently, it's like that with plugins we can do everything what we want. So we can give him every solution what he needs, and for every problem we have something for him, and we always can provide a solution. With apps, it's a bit more tricky. So with apps, you have to think sometimes in a different way, and sometimes it's not so easy to get to a solution because it's a very new system. There are some restrictions, like you can use PHP. You're not allowed to override all or extend all what you need. And for me, currently, that's the big difference and the big thing, that with plugins, everything is possible and we always can provide a solution. With apps, we're a bit limited. It's a different way, a different approach. Yeah, but I think we will get to it today in a more, in a better way.
So what you're saying is you have to get a little bit more creative when dealing with specific challenges, right? Find a way to approach it. All right, that makes a lot of sense. Christopher Dusin, when you approach the SEO plugin or app that you're now building, what are some of the challenges that you face there?
I mean, with a plugin, you can basically change everything inside the core, like inside Shopware. That's, I think, also one of the main differences between a plugin and an app system. And also the difference, let's first get to the difference between the plugins and the app system. I think with the app system, you can build basically an app with almost every language you want, like Symfony or Laravel or in Python or JavaScript or whatever. So it doesn't, you can basically write the app with a, what's the word in English? With basically any language you want. So that's one of the main reasons, or one of the main differences. And now I lost the question from you. Thank you. Can you repeat the question, please?
So I asked what are some of the maybe difference that you see with a plugin, some of the challenges that you might be facing while implementing specifically the SEO features. I think is interesting.
Yeah. I think with the plugin system, you already get, for example, all the admin components that you currently have. That's also we need to put a lot of work, let's say, into the view components that we build for our app. There is the new Meteor library from Shopware that is providing some view components already, but quite a lot of actually missing if you compare it with the plugin system or with the existing component system. So this was kind of like a lot of work to build all these, let's say, view components. Yeah, besides this, it was actually also pretty easy, like Alex said, because at the end you can just build the app with, for example, Laravel. That's our case, so we did it with Laravel for the backend. So you can build the app with any language you want, and that's what makes apps, I guess, pretty easy, because you don't need to dive into the whole plugin system that Shopware is providing you, or let's say the framework around that Shopware is providing with the plugin system. So that makes it, I guess, in my opinion, pretty easy to start with the app system. Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Maybe I want to add, and it's easier to maintain it because, for example, if you have a regular plugin and a new Shopware update is coming like 6.5, for example, hopefully, then you have to change a lot of things. The interfaces are here deprecated and this is deprecated and everything is like duplicated. And with apps, it's much more stable. And it was much easier to update, for example, from Shopware 6.4 to 6.5.
All right, that's good to hear. So what I'm hearing in general is it takes a little bit of puzzling on how to take a certain approach, but once you find an approach, it's a very stable way of developing apps. Right, that's good to hear. So, Alexander, I want to highlight something that you mentioned on resources, on developers. Right, it takes a different approach, maybe more JavaScript, what have you. How do you find the right developers to build apps? Is that a Shopware developer that you retrain? Do you hire a different people? What's your approach there?
This is a good question. I think there are multiple approaches, like always in a company. Of course, first you need to find some persons who are interested in app development as a foundation. But then, of course, afterwards, of course, like a one-to-one coaching or one-to-many coaching within the company, of course, is a great way to share knowledge, as always. But I think, for example, if you go to the Shopware documentation, there's a part of it called the Shopware app guide. And I can really recommend it because it's pretty easy to understand and to learn with it. And of course, it makes sense to always have like a side project or a small project to get started with Shopware app development.
Yeah, that is a good point. And so just to be clear, I think this is more front-end development than back-end development. Is that correct?
It really depends on the feature you are building.
Okay.
For example, there are some features where no external server is required. For example, if you don't need webhooks or if you don't really need the store API or something like that, then you're fine with Twig, CSS, JavaScript. But of course, if a backend is involved, like an external server, then you need backend programming languages. But there you have the choice. You can use PHP, you can use Node.js, like any language which comes to your mind. And yeah, then with a custom backend, there comes a great responsibility.
Very true, very true. Casper Dussen, who is working in your team on the new SEO app? Did you go out and find new developers? Do you see there's a requirement for new skills?
I mean, we are still searching for someone like a senior dev, but at the end, in our case, we split it between the backend and let's say the front end, because we on the one side, we have the Laravel application, which is, just a Laravel application, like 100% backend. And then we also have the whole Vue application. So in our case, we built a whole Vue application. We wanted to go with Nuxt in the beginning, but then we decided just to go with a standalone Vue application, let's say. And this involves, of course, like tons of JavaScript and let's say front end stuff. So we split it between the backend and the front end. And I think the great thing about this also is, in the best case, you already have the people in your team that are comfortable, for example, with Vue.js, right? Because plugins are built with Vue.js. Even though you could also just build it with React, for example. And at the end, the, let's say, front end is just communicating via the APIs. At the end, you could just hire a React freelancer or whoever. And he could also basically build the front end for your app, because at the end, it's just, just pinging APIs and all this stuff. But yeah, that's how we did it. Of course, you need some people with a, let's say, kind of like background, because in our case, we are handling like tons of data. We decided, for example, also to go with MongoDB to, save all this data that we are collecting. Yeah, I think at the end, it's totally up to you. I mean, at the end, you can also build an app just with, 100% JavaScript, like 100% JavaScript. So I think it really depends on the architecture or the way you go. And then you can decide, okay, which people do I need for my app system or for my app? Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Christian Rades, what has Shopware done to improve the developer experience for apps, right? Because it's a whole new different world, different kinds of developers that we're addressing. So what were some of the key components that you worked in there?
Yeah. So for example, what we did is we extended a bit the Shopware CLI, which is a community-driven like toolkit / CLI tool that can help you just uploading and installing apps and just making the deployment to a Shopware instance a bit smoother of your app. And apart from that, which I guess is not that much DX related, but still pretty neat feature we've added, is custom entities. So now you have also the ability to describe additional entities you want to have in your system, and that you can also link together with existing Shopware entities, and you can just write and edit over the CRUD API as normal. And apart from that, we've also added the app scripts that Alexander already mentioned, and they give you the possibility to avoid having to host your own backend. So they allow you to write your own little scripts and snippets that can interact with the Shopware database and provide their own endpoints over the Shopware API, so that you can have some specialized and performance critical code and scripts in Shopware itself, and just deliver the code, which we then execute through an extra execution engine, so everything stays sandboxed.
Yeah, definitely a good point. Something that you mentioned that I definitely want to get into is indeed app script, right? We have PHP, we have JavaScript, but then we also have something new called app script. Maybe you can start shortly with giving a short introduction, Christian.
Yes.
Before I hand over to Alexander.
Very happy to. So app scripts. So to get the worst thing out of the way, yes, they are scripts written in Twig, but it's not as horrible as of an idea as it sounds, because the thing is, we wanted to allow developers, extension developers, to provide performance critical features in or through an app, and we couldn't really do it through an API, because having random API waiting for responses to webhooks, for example, in the cart collection process or cart calculation, things like that, runs the risk of really exploding the runtime of the checkout, or maybe of page loads, things like that. And so we kept the webhooks one way, and then added the app scripts as a way to have a two-way system. And the app scripts themselves are based in Twig because Twig already brings with it a custom in-memory runtime for PHP. So the issue is that you can't really deliver PHP code because you can always break out. But you can't also like maybe deliver a Docker image or something like that, which was also an idea of us, or a WebAssembly binary or something like this, because then you always have the overhead of trying to serialize and deserialize entity in PHP, sending them to a third-party system, even if it's running on the same server or maybe even in the same process, and then serializing and deserializing it back into PHP. So this would lead to a massive overhead. And our solution for that is to use an already proven sandbox, in this case Twig, and then execute those Twig scripts where you then can, with the help of some additional helper functions, modify the objects passed into it and provide your own API endpoints through those scripts, and manipulate the card through those scripts, and do all those performance critical parts directly on in-memory PHP objects to keep it fast. We've also thought about maybe giving it a nicer syntax, but we decided against it because we figured that we are already using a proven and well-known language, Twig. So to change the syntax into something custom would just produce more overhead for developers to get to understand it and know how to use it. And so we decided on Twig, just like this, to not use the rendered output of the Twig script, but just use objects as input and output variables. And thus the app script system was born. And then afterwards, we added the ability to use them as controllers, where you just define an app script that is then called through an API route, so that you can even add your own endpoints in the store API and the admin API.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the typo script in typo tree from back in the day. Alexander, what is your experience with TypeScript?
My experience is that it's pretty easy, and maybe I can show it to you by sharing my screen.
Yeah, fantastic.
I think having something visual is always better. All right. Do you see my screen now? Okay, for example, here we have the Google Tag Manager cloud application. Maybe some of you are using it already. And we have restructured the code a little bit because in the previous version, we had, for example, the problem that we had some race conditions because the storefront is doing some external store API calls, but maybe the page is already reloading and many more problems. And for example, with app scripts, we solved, I think, all of the problems now, and they are pretty easy to use. For example, to create an X script, you just have to, of course, create a cloud app. Then you go to the resources owner, and then here's the scripts folder. And if you open the scripts folder, you are seeing many hooks. For example, the checkout cart page loaded, which is, of course, loaded when the cart page is loaded. Okay. And if you open it, you can, for example, place one or more scripts here. In this case, we are enriching, for example, with some more data to send it to Google Tag Manager. And here again, you open it and you can see the magic here. It's just regular Twig at the end. You're getting some inputs like already taught, and you can modify it. And for example, you can output the data by adding it, for example, to a page as an extension. And that's pretty it. It's always the same logic, at least in this application: input, modifying, output. And for example, if you have some shared logic, you can have an additional folder like the include folder, and then you can add some helpers. For example, like a kind of Twig macro. It's the equivalent of a PHP function or method. Or here again, I think it's only a macro. And that's all regarding app scripts.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Basically, So basically, every folder is already a hook from Shopware.
Yes,
So you need to follow this let's say folder structure.
Yes, some folders are already defined. From my understanding, for example, here there are like thousands of hooks available, and you of course have to find the hooks, and then you can place your scripts there. And if you want to use custom folders, it's possible too. But of course, it's important that they do not collide with the standard hooks.
And inside the twig files, like how is it, like are they blowing up at some point, or can you just extract some logic into maybe different files? Because if you have like at the end a huge file of, I don't know, hundreds of twig lines, or can you just extract it somehow? Better organize it, let's say.
In this application, this is the idea of this include folder with those helper methods or macros. You can, share some code, for example, this build variant macro. And then, for example, I need to find a part here. You see, you can reuse it again across multiple hooks. So yes, it's possible.
Okay.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Christoph, but what is your experience with AppScript?
Yeah,
that's why I asked, because
I really like the idea of app scripts, because when we look how we do it with plugins, or how we did it with plugins, we have two ways to store our data. The first thing is custom fields, and the second thing is custom entities. And now with the new custom entities, thanks to Shopware, that make it possible. So it's also possible to use this. So we can have our own table, or we can store the data in the custom fields. And so our idea behind this, we store the data at the shop server and we output the data at the shop server. So why we need a different server just to get the data, handle it, and put it out? And it doesn't make sense. And also, as Christian says, when you have some hooks or in the cart where the performance is very important, or let's say when you want to manipulate prices for products or something like this, we don't believe that our own server is the best solution for it. So I really like the idea of app scripts. I was already playing around with it. Very cool. The only thing what I don't like is that it's very limited until now. But we're already speaking with Shopware, I think every 2 weeks to extend it. And we say, hey, please make this hook or this hook for us. And I think in the future it can be better and better, that we can do much more with it. But I like the idea, and it's perfect for the apps to make many things possible.
Yeah, for sure. It's a very powerful tool. Now, if I don't go for an app script, I'm resorting more to an app server, of course, an offsite backend, a SaaS service I built myself. Christopher Dusen, what are some of the considerations there in terms of, let's say, our infrastructure, for example?
Yeah. By the way, regarding the app scripts, I think, we definitely, we didn't work with the app scripts yet, but I think it's quite the same like you have, for example, in Craft CMS. We can basically, call some logic in the front end. And I think the coolest thing about this type of stuff is that also a front end dev can basically write the logic in the front end without needing a back end dev, for example. So that was my experience, at least with Craft CMS, but I think it's quite the same logic here in the app script, which is like at the end super cool. You asked about the hosting, right? Oh God, I'm always forgetting things.
So more infrastructure concerns, right? So are we talking just about cheap hosting somewhere, or did you put in some more consideration?
Yeah, I mean, at the end, the app is not released yet, but even though we are collecting like hundreds of thousands of data, because at the end it's an SEO app with all the keywords, related keywords, and all this stuff. So at the end, it's pretty massive data, I would say. So that's why we are going for MongoDB, because it's basically scalable. Currently, I think we need to wait a bit and see how the traffic is going for the app. But I think with Laravel, you're quite flexible, because at the end you also have, for example, Vapor, So you can basically host your app pretty easy on AWS, which is then like, yeah, basically scalable until the end, let's say. But I would say I wouldn't go for cheap hosting, let's say, because at the end, if you have like, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of API calls every minute or every seconds or whatever, I would say you need to consider at least a stable hosting, and of course also monitor all the traffic and all this stuff. But I think at the end we have to see. Also, I think how many people are actually installing the app. But that's something I think we will consider after we collected some data. But I think with especially now Laravel and AWS, we will be quite flexible regarding the scaling of the app. Yeah.
Yeah, and then something we discussed offline is maybe also interesting to bring up here, the data or GDPR concerns, right? Especially if you're running a backend on a different server, processing customer data. All of a sudden you need to have some agreements with the merchant, data processor agreements and what have you. And if you have any experience with this or any considerations that you had before where you maybe opted to go with a custom entity versus having an app server to avoid this hassle.
No, nobody else does.
Yeah. Or maybe even someone from the audience that says, okay, we looked into apps, but this was something that we had to consider.
I mean, in our case, for example, I think we are not collecting any, let's say, private data. We are not storing any customer data or shipping address or whatever. But I don't know. Maybe someone else has some thoughts about the data privacy, because at the end it's super important, I guess, right? Especially not for the app provider, but maybe for the let's say Shopware user that is providing this in the storefront, let's say to his or her end customers basically. But yeah, good question, I would say, right?
If anyone wants to join in, please raise your hand. In the meantime, Christian, what are some of the mechanisms that Shopware put in place to protect data?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the, I guess, most prominent things is our ACL system. So one of those things that came with moving into or becoming a part-time cloud provider is that we also wanted to allow the shop users, the merchants, to have more control over which data is sent to external servers and to make it clear to them and get like informed consent. And to that goal, we built or we added an ACL system to our apps, which is based on the already implemented ACL system that also works in the administration. And this system makes the app define all the data it wants to access, and if it wants to just read the data or modify it or even delete it. And the user is then presented with a summary of those necessary permissions on the app install, so that the merchant is always informed about which which informations the app needs to know and with which information it interacts. Apart from that, we also built a standardized way to deliver out the like third-party data management forms that are necessary for GDPR compliance. You can add that to your app, and then it will be also shown to the user, and they have to accept it, so that everyone is informed about where the data lands and what they can do about it.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it's clear that apps are very powerful, also have some limitations, definitely some consideration when it comes to maybe infrastructure, what have you. But Acres has a lot of plugins on the store. As you are migrating maybe some of them to apps, what are some of the use cases that you identify where an app is well suited, maybe not well suited? Can you go a little bit into that?
Basically, when the apps came out and the app scripts came out, we had one day at Acris where we said, okay, we take a look in it, we take one of our best plugins and try to make them as an app. And it's not so easy. the app scripts are cool and very powerful, as I said, but some things are missing because the customers have really interesting requests for us. They want really sometimes they want really hard, like say hard features or features they want from us what Shopware don't know, that someone needs to dive into this code, and that makes it very very difficult for us. For example, as one example I want to share with you is we have a plugin where we can add surcharges and discounts to the cart. Okay, so far so good. So we have one table where you can, as one custom table and database, where you can place your surcharges and discounts. So the first thing is in the cart, we want to load the surcharges and the discounts. But in the cart with the app script, you don't have a possibility to have to get something from a database, to load something. There is no repository, for example. That's the first thing. I think Shopware will put it in, and that's very fine. But let's see, we can make it in the future. So we stopped, but I think we can continue with this. But the next thing, for example, the customers wants also that the surcharges or discounts are not for the whole cart.
I suspect.
Normally my own internet connection is broken.
Slight hiccup.
And sorry, I was away.
Yeah, you drove off
Yes.
for 5 seconds.
Okay, sorry. So we want to put in the surcharges or discounts, for example, for in the line item scope and not in the cart scope. That means they should be position based, and that's the next thing where we stuck. And that was just now example for one plugin. I can give you 10 more examples if you want. But as I said, we are already about to speak with Shopware, and we look to make more of our plugins compatible, and that's definitely our goal. Yeah, but I think it will take some time until Shopware is there where we can really do the more complex plugins also with that.
Right. So what I'm hearing is, if you want to build an app, really think out how you want to approach the problem, see if you can find the right events, hooks, what have you, to actually implement that, and then decide if you can go forward or not, more or less. Alexander, is that your experience as well?
Yes, I have a similar experience at the moment. A small research phase before you're developing your app, at least if you are suspecting that you have some complex features, is required. However, the app system is becoming better and better with every month and year. For example, if I remember back like almost 2 years ago, it was like, I wouldn't say nothing, but it was very reduced, of course. It was like the first prototype version. And now after like 2 or 2.5 years, there are many more interfaces. You can build store APIs, administration APIs, and more with app scripts, for example. Also here again, this keyword. And for example, I think maybe like in 1 or 2 years, it will be like a complete solution, because you're of course learning from the feedback, or the Shopware development team is learning from feedback. And I think it's a huge opportunity to get started now, to get some cool ideas into the Shopware store before somebody else is doing it. And, you can reserve your idea, but of course, it's a little bit limited for now, but it will become better.
I would have 2 wishes for Shopware, and special to Christian. The first thing is make every Symfony hook or every Symfony event possible in app scripts to subscribe. That would be perfect. The second thing is to override also services with app scripts. That would be perfect. Then we can make nearly every plugin, and that would really help us. But I think you're not. It's a bit.
Yeah, just give me a week, then I'll have it implemented. No, I'll take that feedback with me. And especially decorating services is something we will have a look in again here to find better public APIs. And this is kind of the thing that we in general are working on, to get better and better at refining our public APIs so that still extending everything is possible, while at the same time not making the same with mistakes we made with Shopware 5, where you couldn't change anything for fear of breaking everybody's extensions and projects and plugins. And because this is at the heart of it, kind of one of the issues, that we want to stay like mobile enough to adapt to our current and future challenges and to provide more and more value, while at the same time we're having to fight with backwards compatibility and making sure that that everything that people build on our framework still works the same way and just gets added value by all the new features we built in.
All right, brilliant. Before I'm gonna ask Christian about the roadmap, I want to do a quick fire round. The one big learning you would have wanted to have before you started with apps. Let's start with Christopher Dosin. What would you wanted to have known before you started?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. By the way, what I also wanted to say regarding the functionality of apps, or in general, I think the great thing, if it's not too complex, you can just do a pull request to Shopware. For example, if it's a webhook, or if you want to extend the Meteor library because some components are missing and this kind of stuff, you can just do a pull request. And I guess compared to Shopware 4 or 5, Shopware is now pretty fast to also merge it and be, how's the word in English? Communicative with the pull requests and all this stuff. So we did some pull requests already for the admin SDK, Meteor library, or a webhook for the core system. So that's, I would say, also the great thing about open source and Shopware, that you can just extend it by yourself or do a pull request. And now again, I forgot the question before. So sorry about this one.
One big thing that you would have preferred to know upfront before you started with apps.
Yeah, I mean, our challenge is now, because we are also communicating with some external APIs for the app system. It's currently hard for us to put out the app because we don't know yet how to handle the payments, let's say. Because if you're calling external API endpoints, and for example, you have a customer that is, I don't know, calling the endpoint, I don't know, 10,000 times, you will get charged by whatever service you use, AWS, Azure, or OpenAI, or whatever. So that's a tricky part now for us to, I don't know how to solve it currently, but that's a tricky part currently. You can't offer different payment plans than you have, for example, with Shopify. So that's currently a tricky part, let's say, that I should have known before, let's say. But other than that, it worked really great with the app system. No issues. But that's definitely something we need to consider before with the payment plans, basically.
Yeah, good point. Chris, but
to dump something in an app script. Sounds funny, but trust me, it's not so easy. No, but
so how do you dump it then?
Yeah, you need to go in PHP and then you print the output what you get from the app script, and then you see it. But maybe there's also a better way. I didn't find it. But yeah, no. What really would be nice is to have a better documentation for it. So I really like the app training, for example, which is at the Shopware Academy. That's very cool, and there is very much information. But the documentation, especially the developer documentation, I think it could be much better. And one thing I'm missing from Shopware, and we are Shopware 6 specialists, and we always look how I always say to my developers, do it like Shopware would do, because Shopware 6 has a very good architecture. They have routes, they have the caching stuff, they have, I don't know, they have really really good design patterns and code patterns for developing code. And I always say, do it like Shopware would do. And also a wish from me from Shopware is, please do your from your plans, your features also as apps. Do a B2B suite as app. Do a dynamic access as an app and not as a plugin. I think when Shopware do this, their own features as apps, then they will put in the functionalities who they need for their apps much easier into the core, and also we can use it. We learn also from the Shopware plugins. We learn from the Shopware core, and that's the thing that would be really nice and really help us for developing apps.
Yeah, very good point. Dog feeding. Alexander?
I think I have the shortest answer. Not really.
Awesome.
I'm happy at the moment with apps. Of course, some features are missing, but I think we here at the agency are very optimistic.
Right, fantastic. Christian, now you're going to tell us all the problems are going to be solved in the next release.
Yeah, obviously.
Awesome.
But I'll take another week for that. No, but seriously. So to kind of combine Christopher and Alexander's comment, is that we are actually currently in the process of like dog feeding more, so using more our own app system. And in a turn of that, we also have a look at all the features surrounding payment providers. So, I mean, currently, like the bare payment is already or has already extension points to be used in an app. But what we want to do is to also make it easier to do things like quick checkouts, syncing customer data, things like that. Those things are currently in planning and in consideration, and we are designing systems to make better interaction with the app system. And apart from the feedback you just said, what we're also working on is to implement the CMS better into apps. Because one of the older issues with that is, of course, the access of elements in the CMS to data, and we're also working on that.
One question from my side for you, Christian.
Yes.
Because in my opinion, some features, for example, like adding custom fields, is much easier with apps compared to plugins. And sometimes if we are developing stores, we have like a hybrid solution where we have this really easy to use manifest for adding custom fields. And then if we have some, I don't know, complex or heavy logic, which is built with a plugin, which is writing, for example, the data to custom fields. And it would be really great to have somehow a possibility to use some of those XML markups like the custom fields in plugins directly.
Also
yeah.
entities.
This is actually a good point, because at the end of the day, there was already the idea once to like integrate more of the app system into the plugin system to allow for hybrid solutions. And so getting the feedback that this is something that is actively wanted is pretty good. Because this also makes like changing between the two systems easier. And that is something that we'll definitely look into. So thank you for mentioning that.
I have also a question regarding the payment. So just to get it right, let's say you have an app, and let's say you want to offer like, I don't know, 2 different plans for the app. So each app or each plan, let's say, I don't know, you maybe have a 5 gigs plan, then you have 100 gigs, and then you have, I don't know, 1000 gigabyte, for example, that you need to store on AWS or whatever. And then you will be able to charge as an app provider based on the different plans, let's say, or for example, based on, I don't know, requests or traffic or, you know, whatever, just be able to provide different plans for your app, depending on the, let's say, consumption of the end user, of the app user.
Yes. This is also something we're looking into. We are aware that this is very important because, well, it's how you make money. One of the bigger issues there is mostly that it has to involve bookkeeping, and changing bookkeeping in a company is always a bit of a process. But we are currently trying to find ways to add this system, or to add a possibility to like buy things from an app. So different plans, for example, different contingents of requests, things like that. But I can't tell you too much info about that because I'm not that much in contact with the area that is developing that feature. I just know they're currently in a concept phase and figuring out how they can add it to the account.
Okay. Yeah, kind of like in-app purchases or kind of like this would be like perfect. Kind of like a credit system or so inside the app would be perfect. Okay, then let's talk in a year again.
As we already went into questions, maybe we can open up the room to questions. Please.
I need to go to the toilet quick. Sorry.
To the guys already using apps, what about debugging the stuff you were showing, especially Alexander, perhaps?
The solution is always the method dump. For example, if you're developing apps, of course, it's easy to use tweak and dump just in the front end to print all the variables, the context of a specific file. But it's also possible to use dump, for example, in app scripts and to print it out to the Symfony debug bar. It's like a little bit hidden, but it's possible, without going to like PHP file and etc. And of course, if you're using a self-hosted version and if you are comfortable using the debugger, it's also a possibility to use it because it's pretty much regular PHP and then somehow, for example, Twig is called. And yeah, frontend, it's of course easier with JavaScript and CSS because it's more visual. Here again, you can use, for example, the JS debugger as well. And if, for example, backends are involved, then probably a debugger is a good way to go because, for example, maybe you are developing locally, then you have your example store, it's somehow communicating to your backend. And then, of course, if a webhook, for example, happened, and then it's nice to know what, for example, the payload of a webhook is in detail. But I think this is the way to go, at least from my experience.
Thanks.
Sander, do you see people raising hands currently? Sven is raising hands. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I would.
I have just one indeed. That's Sven. Sven, please.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. As from my point of view, as I'm not a developer, please don't stone me for my questions. But with regards to the new SaaS approach of Shopware, the idea behind using apps is to keep the core of Shopware untouched, like for example other tools as commerce tools and so on, and Celum do as well. And everything you customize for your products will be done in apps. And what I read on the blog is that Shopware recommends doing private apps, and the way you build a private app is the same as you do with an app you would put onto the store, right? So everything
Yes.
we discuss here is the same if you publish an app on the store which you want to sell via using an app that is solely for the purpose of your individual projects.
Yes, we built the app system to be just as decoupled from Shopware, the company, as the plugin system, which means that you can, of course, add your app to our store, extension store, and then use that to distribute it to people. But the whole app system also is able to work without authenticating against like Shopware, the company's systems. So
okay, that was my question, because I read or someone said that of course you have to follow the guidelines and the rules an app is developed, but I read something like the data that is generated has to go through some kind of third-party servers to be analyzed and things like that. But then okay.
No. We have an ACL system, but this is wholly implemented in Shopware, and like the app gets its own API user. But this is all happening on like the Shopware instance, the shop itself. And apart from that, I guess the only thing is that if you use a private app in our cloud system, it will still run the plugin check so that everything is configured correctly, but you don't need the authentication against Shopware server there.
Okay, that's great. And the next thing is then if you imagine an architecture, Shopware is run on a SaaS solution, and we can run our apps using whatever Kubernetes cluster, Docker images, and so on. Because at the moment we're working quite frequently with Kubernetes and microservices, and so we can implement that. And the benefit would be, because we have a limited team of PHP developers, but a huge team of Java developers, and so they could do everything besides Shopware without the need to use PHP as a language.
Yes, yes. The app system can also function as a I guess a nicely abstracted way of building an integration, where before, when you're building an integration, you'd have to create like an extra API key. Now you can also do this through an app and also define maybe some custom fields like in one package that you can push to a shop.
Okay, great. Then the main updates will be performed by you, by Shopware, and we have to just make sure that all of our private apps run with the new updates and so on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that the private apps just need to conform or need to be able to talk to the API.
Yeah. And so we can set it up on like you, Christopher said, on AWS or Azure or whatever, and keep the system where it is. Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
But in general, also
on SpaceX.
Yeah. Okay, that's from my part. Thanks a lot.
Regarding the hosting on, for example, AWS, imagine you are building an app and then your whole hosting is crashing, let's say. What is happening then, for example, let's say you are manipulating the storefront. Do we have any fallback or anything like that? So let's just imagine the app is crashing for whatever reason. Then your whole functionality is basically gone for like the period of time your infrastructure is gone, let's say.
Yes, but especially for the case of webhooks, so we do have a backup system. So we are aware that this is, of course, then like the classic problem of distributed systems, that connections may fail. And so if a webhook is not delivered, it will be marked as undelivered and then be queued to be tried again in a few minutes at first, and then in a few hours before it will be thrown away. And so should a system or the transport or something fail, then it will be retried several times till it gets delivered once. The only issue is still the, like if you have it in your storefront and you're talking in your storefront to a third-party server to do something, then yes, this might break a feature. But then again, this is just a general risk. For example, if you are using a search engine like Algolia or something, if that search engine is broken, then you won't be able to find any products. So I guess that's the normal risk of using a third-party system.
Okay.
All right. I think that concludes the questions that we have. I do want to let everybody know that there's an app development channel in the Shopware community Slack, so be sure to join that. And other than that, I just want to thank all of the speakers for their time today, for answering the questions, for sharing your input. And I want to thank the whole community for coming out and making this event happen. Have a wonderful evening and see you at the next event.
Thanks. We have a clap
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Goodbye.